I'll now turn to the deputies. Deputy Murphy, first.
Thanks, and thanks a lot for your presentation. And first of all, I'd just like to pay tribute to all of you and Fiona for the work you've done in terms of against very powerful forces that you're up against. A community and a campaign fighting for debt justice for people in this country. I agree with the call for a cross-party committee, but I would also warn you that I think you won't be able to wind up your campaign because it will be necessary to keep pushing, because if you aren't pushing from outside of here, then the pressure won't be there. So I think even if a cross-party committee is set up, and I would definitely support that, I would encourage you to keep going with your campaign, because you've got to this point, but it'll take more to do it. I think the work you've done is very valuable in two kind of broad respects in terms of the educational Ballyhea says no, KNOW aspect of it. One, the myth busting that this was a bailout for Ireland. I entirely agree it wasn't. It was a bailout for the European banking system, paid for by ordinary people, by austerity for years and years and years, and the misery that caused. Less than 1% of Europe's population taking on over 40% of Europe's banking debt. But the second point, and what I want to hone in on, is the other myth, which is even more dangerous, which is the idea that, well, we are where we are, that this is all very unfortunate, that it's something that's happened in the past, that we were pressured into it, and maybe we shouldn't have done it back then even, but look, we are where we are, it's done, and there's nothing that can be done about it. So I'd like to just focus in a little bit on that. Can you explain what's currently happening in terms of the destruction of money by the central bank? 10.5 billion since 2014, another 14.5 billion to go. Can you explain how that works, why that doesn't make sense from the point of view of people in this country, and what the alternative is?
Okay, thank you, Paul, and thank you for your support as well over the last number of years, and your support on this as well, and your support when you were in the European Parliament, because you got us hearings out there. What's happening currently, the way it's being reported, and like trying to get information on what exactly is happening is very, very difficult. I think Michael asked a parliamentary question last year which uncovered how much exactly had been destroyed up to now, because we were kind of speculating, because sometimes you miss these little reports. Another 500 million euro has been destroyed, but you don't know that it's happened. But the way it's reported, the only place it is reported is in the, you'll get a little report in the RTE News website and in the Irish Times, and it's basically a copy and paste report. So it looks to me like something that has been fed out from either the Central Bank or the Department of Finance, that they just copy and paste, because all of these, every time something happens, they're almost identical to the previous one that has been issued. And what they declare it almost to be a good news story, you know, that the Central Bank has made a profit on this IBRC, note of the IBRC wind-up notes. They declared a profit of 150 billion or whatever like that went to the Exchequer, because they sold this 500 million euro bond for 650 million euro or whatever, and it's presented a good news story. God, the country has made 150 billion euro, and what is not told is the full story. And this is why I have a major problem with some of the media here, that they talk about fake news, but there's incomplete news also, which is almost as bad as fake news. In fact, it can be worse than fake news, because what they don't tell us is what happened to the 500 million euro. Like the Central Bank got 650, let's say, and they gave 150 million to the Exchequer. But what happened to the 500 million? And that's never mentioned. And what happens to that 500 million is it's destroyed. Or as the governor said to us below there, because I backed him into a corner finally on it, Patrick Owen, and with me that day I had 2 MEPs and I had 2 TDs. I had like Luke Ming Flanagan was with us. I wasn't working for him at the time. Nestor Childers was with us, and then we had the late Peter Matthew, who was a brilliant friend of us in this campaign. He was with us as an ex-banker, and Stephen Donnelly was with us, who should know his finance. And what he eventually said, when I pressed him, I said, what happens to the money? And he said, well, it's extinguished. And that's what's happening with this money. Like the money, the 31 billion euro was printed by the central bank and given to these banks, and allowed that, the ECB allowed this to happen. And because those banks are wound up and weren't able to repay that money, that 31 billion euro has to be taken back out of circulation. And that's what's happening. That's what this process is about. It's taking that 31 billion euro back out of circulation. So the bonds are being held, and these bonds that, under the new Michael Noonan deal, there were, I don't know how many, I think it was 10 500 million euro bonds, and there were 5 that were supposed to be sold at a rate of 1 a year under the new deal from 2014, 500 million euro a year for 5 years, $1 billion a year for 5 years, and just gradually taken out of circulation. But what's actually happening is because interest rates have gone way down, and these bonds are now being bought by the National Treasury Management Agency. So again, what's not being told to people in this thing is that the central bank is given 650 million euro, but they're given it by the National Treasury Management Agency. So it's all borrowed money that's buying these bonds. So even the 150 million euro that's being declared as profit is also borrowed money. It's borrowed by the NTMA. The 650 million euro is given to the central bank for the 500 million euro bond. The 500 million euro is destroyed. Push the button, that money is taken out of circulation, and the 150 million euro is declared as a profit to the exchequer. And this is all that's being reported here is that we made a profit of 150 million euro. What's not being reported is that it's all a circular action. The 150 million euro profit is also borrowed money. It's borrowed by the NTMA and given to the central bank, who then give it to the government. So the entire 650 million euro becomes new debt. And the thing about this new debt then is that from the moment that the central bank is given that 650 million euro, we are paying interest on that 650 million euro. The 150 million that they get in interest, given interest to the government, plus the 500 million euro, that's destroyed. So we're paying interest on that 650 million euro from them. And that 650 million euro also has to be repaid in full when the bond matures. So this is happening right now. And over the last 4 years, at a time when this country was crying out for money, and I listened to people like highly paid radio presenters talking to people like yourself, Paul, when you talk about, the money for Irish water could come from here, the money to fix the hospital system could come from here, the money, and you say, but where will we get the money? But our central bank destroyed 10.5 billion euro in the last 4 years. And it was borrowed money. This was money that the NTMA had and could have used for other things. But they choose, and this government has chosen, to accelerate the destruction process. And Michael, I think you had made a point about that in the Dáil, I think it was earlier this year. And they've chosen to accelerate the process, but they are destroying real money. And people are saying this is only all computerized money. The debt is real. The interest that we're paying is real. And the suffering and the deprivation then of services here is real as a result. That money that the NTMA had and gave to the central bank could have been used for other issues here. But they've chosen instead to destroy the money. And there's still, I think it's 10.5 still to go, 14.5 still to go. And like this, to me, is an obscenity that at a time when our services are struggling for finance, we are destroying money. Billions.
And can you explain what the alternative is?
Well, the alternative, you see, we went, when this all started, I won't pretend we're experts because we're not, and when this all started, we didn't have much of a clue about all this, but we went to the ECB, we went to all the various, as I said in the presentation, we met like the most senior officials. We met the guy in the Commission who was responsible not just for Ireland's finances during that intervention, but also he was responsible for the macro finances of 3 countries. He was one of the senior economists he had strings of letters after his name, his qualifications from all over the place. And we sat, Kathleen and would tell you, and Phil would tell you, we sat in the room with him for an hour and debated with him for an hour with no qualifications. And he could not show us how this was right, what they were doing. Couldn't. But the biggest issue for us when we met the ECB here, senior officials from the Troika that were here, and we sat down with them for nearly 2 hours. And this was after having a meeting with Patrick Honohan below in the Central Bank, Fiona and myself, where we came out I never was more depressed coming out of a meeting, because the guy just patronised us, and I know I have to be careful what I say, but like he almost patted Fiona on the head going, oh, just leave this with me, I can handle it, this is a way over your head. And we went up to the ECB and we sat down with them, and like, first of all, we laid out our case. We argued our case, they argued back, they were, that's what I'm saying, this will be a fight. But the most significant thing that they said to us, and we did a report on it afterwards, was, he said, this could be tackled, but he said it would be very difficult. And that's what he didn't say, this is impossible, this can't be done. He said, it would be very difficult. Now, as a fellow from a small parish, it would have been very difficult for us to win a county, and we won a county under 14, and a county junior, and a county intermediate, and got to a senior county final. The idea that something is very difficult, and therefore it shouldn't be attempted, to me is the total opposite. Like, you pick your best team, which is what we'd be asking here. You train to the nth degree, you prepare to the nth degree, and you go into battle with the ECB on this. And it can be one, because like they're saying, like there were so many things that they were saying, oh, this can't be done, that can't be done. Same thing happened at the beginning of this crisis. They were saying that the ECB was saying this can't be done, that can't be done. Quantitative easing couldn't be done. And then you got to the situation where they're printing €80 billion a month. A month.
Yeah, just to take up that point about quantitative easing, because doesn't the burning of money, real money, like you're saying, it contradicts the general policy of quantitative easing. So over here you have quantitative easing on a massive scale, but in reality it's like quantitative squeezing taking place in terms of burning this money. So can you explain, if we simply froze the sale of the bonds and wrote down the debt, would there be any negative implication in terms of inflation across the Eurozone, or what other negative implications would there be?
Well, the quantitative squeezing was a term coined by Luke outside in the Parliament, because like he's he's good at it. But that's what it is. It's we are destroying a small country. Okay, it's only 30 billion, but it's massive for us against the creation of 80 billion a month by them. Something they said couldn't be done. But yeah, they would have ramifications. I mean, you're taking on the ECB, but we're saying that's what we should do. Is challenge the ECB on this, because like it's not just morally that this can be challenged. I mean, it's immoral, but on the legality side of it as well, it could also be challenged. And like there are so many other things. There are reports that we've commissioned outside that have been done by different people, and I can send you copies of the reports where like there are other avenues that can be explored as well. Legal avenues that can be explored also. But like, the ECB must be challenged on this, and like, we should absolutely stop the sale now of any further ones and just freeze that, because anybody here in this room knows, like, if somebody owes you money or you owe somebody money, once the money has changed hands, it's a lot more difficult to get it back. So, I mean, you can stop now the sale of the remaining ones, but I think you should also be fighting to get back what has been done, because all they have to do is reprint the 14.5 billion, which in terms of what they've done in scale, it would be a drop in the ocean. It would have absolutely no impact in terms of inflation across the Eurozone.